Have you ever wondered what makes humanity worth fearing when every other species learned to obey logic? The Valor calculated that emotion was a flaw, an evolutionary accident meant to be erased. They optimized entire galaxies, perfect order, perfect silence. Then they found Earth. What they didn't understand was that humans are born of chaos. We build meaning from loss. We find purpose in pain. And when the universe tells us to surrender, we smile, bleed, and take one more step forward. The day Elias Rourke left the atmosphere, the stars watched a dying man defy the mathematics of inevitability. Because sometimes, what saves humanity isn't reason. It's the beautiful, terrifying refusal to quit. Before we begin, subscribe, like, and tell me from which city or planet you're watching this. This story explores one of humanity's greatest paradoxes: why meaning matters more than survival. Elias Rourke was dying before he even left the atmosphere. The Chernobyl 7 reactor, a relic banned by the Geneva Space Convention of 2247, but still cobbled together in Earth's orbital shipyards, leaked radiation into the cramped cockpit at a rate Maeve calculated as 40% lethal before reaching the Valor blockade. 40%. Not great odds. But then again, Rourke had survived worse. He pressed his scarred hands against the coolant controls, feeling the metal sear through his gloves. Every 8 minutes. That was the rhythm now. Redirect flow, burn his palms, keep the reactor from going critical. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the stimulants fighting the chronic pain in his lower back, where a fragment of shrapnel had lodged itself during the Mars Independence Wars, too close to the spine for any surgeon to risk removing. 47 years old. 23 names tattooed on his left forearm. One daughter who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, and one impossible mission. Below him, Earth hung like a wounded animal, encircled by 200 Valor cruisers in perfect formation. The blockade had appeared 6 days ago, their transmission echoing across every frequency. Surrender within 72 hours, accept conversion into the collective consciousness, or face annihilation. 94% of species accepted within that time frame, according to Valor doctrine. Humanity had sent back a single message: we do not surrender. We will send someone to talk. That someone sat in a ship held together by spite and outdated engineering, watching his homeworld shrink behind him. Maeve's voice crackled through the speakers, thick with a synthesized Alabama drawl that Rourke had programmed in during a particularly drunk night 15 years ago. He'd never bothered to change it. You know this is suicide, right? Even for you, this is spectacularly stupid. Rourke wiped blood from his mouth where he'd bitten his cheek during the last acceleration burn. Keep talking, Maeve. Your voice is the only thing keeping me awake. The AI fell silent for 3 seconds. Then, Rourke, the blockade is detecting us. 47 targeting solutions locked. I'm counting. Jesus, I'm counting everything they've got pointed at us. How long until we're in range? 4 minutes. Maybe 5 if you do that insane deceleration burn you're thinking about. Rourke allowed himself a grim smile. The tattoos on his forearm caught his eye in the dim light. 23 names. 23 soldiers who'd followed him into the tunnels beneath Olympus Mons during the siege of 2401. The Martian Legion had been formed during those brutal years when the colonies fought for independence from Earth, only to find themselves abandoned when the galactic network collapsed 2 years later. Mars got its freedom by default, and Rourke got the nickname that followed him like a ghost, the last to retreat. He'd been the only one to walk out of those tunnels. The reactor alarm shrieked. Rourke slammed his palm on the coolant release, feeling skin blister. 6 minutes this time. The rhythm was getting faster. Maeve, what's our actual chance of making it through that blockade? The AI's processors hummed. Statistically, 0.03%, but you've never given a damn about statistics. First missile away, Maeve announced, her voice losing its casual tone. Impact in 20 seconds. Rourke yanked the control stick left, cutting the main engine and firing the starboard thrusters in a maneuver that would have torn apart any ship with proper engineering. His ship, christened the Spite with a piece of duct tape and a Sharpie, just groaned and obeyed. The missile screamed past, close enough that Rourke saw its Valor markings. 32 more inbound, Maeve said. Some of these are going to hit, Rourke. I can't dodge them all. Then don't dodge. Get us through. Through 14 missiles in a firing pattern designed by a species that's been conquering planets for 3,000 years? Sure, easy. The second missile didn't miss. It struck the secondary propulsion array, and the explosion threw Rourke against his restraints hard enough to crack 2 ribs. Alarms screamed. Hull breach warnings flashed red. But the explosion did something the Valor hadn't calculated for. It pushed the Spite forward, straight through a gap in the targeting solutions. Terran ships, built to survive nuclear war and atmospheric re-entry, don't die easy. According to post-siege analysis by Valor engineers, human vessels operated 60 to 80 years behind galactic standards in efficiency, but were constructed with redundancies that bordered on paranoia. Where a modern cruiser had 1 backup system, human ships had 7, each built to function even when 3/4 destroyed. The Spite proved it. Rourke coughed blood, checked the diagnostics through his one working eye where the other had swollen shut from impact, and laughed. "We're still flying." "Barely," Maeve corrected. "Reactors at 60%, life support's failing. And I'm picking up transmissions from the Valor command ship. They're confused. Confused is good. Confused means we're doing something they didn't expect." The blockade loomed ahead, a wall of ships that could glass a planet. And somewhere in the center, the command cruiser where High Priest Velkarin waited. Rourke reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, creased and stained. Emma at 8 years old, smiling at the camera on a beach that no longer existed. The last time she'd looked at him with anything other than hatred. She was 16 now. He'd missed 9 years choosing war over family. He pressed the photo against the console and keyed in the final acceleration burn. "Maeve, if this works, make sure Earth knows I wasn't a hero. I was just too stubborn to quit. And if it doesn't work, then it won't matter." The reactor screamed, the hull buckled, and Elias Rourke, the last to retreat, punched through the Valor blockade like a bullet through paper, heading straight for the heart of an empire that had never seen anything quite like him. High Priest Velkarin had witnessed the conversion of 417 species over his 3 centuries of service. He understood the mathematics of surrender, pressure applied, resistance calculated, peace inevitable. Humanity's response defied every variable. 1 ship, 1 human. Approaching his command cruiser like a moth seeking flame. "Your orders, High Priest?" The tactical coordinator's consciousness rippled through the collective network, tinged with uncertainty. Velkarin observed the human vessel through enhanced sensors. It was leaking radiation, venting atmosphere, and somehow still accelerating. Terran engineering he'd read in the restricted archives was built on a principle the Valor had long abandoned, the assumption that everything would fail, and designing accordingly. "Destroy it," Velkarin ordered. "But preserve the pilot if possible. I would understand what drives such irrationality." Inside the Spite, Rourke was talking to himself again. A habit Maeve had logged approximately 3,000 times over their 15-year partnership. It started after Mars, after the tunnels. Jenkins would have laughed at this, Rourke muttered, dodging another missile by killing thrust entirely and letting momentum carry him through the targeting solution. 23 years old, full of piss and vinegar, thought he was invincible. Maeve's voice softened. "The young private from your squad?" Rourke's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The name was 6th on his arm, between Horvath and Chen. The Martian independence wars had been humanity's crucible, fought in the red dust while Earth descended into chaos following the network collapse. The Legion had been formed from civilians, miners, engineers. Rourke had been a structural engineer before they handed him a rifle and a squad of kids who'd never seen combat. 23 entered the tunnels beneath Olympus Mons to destroy a fusion reactor that would have melted half the settlement. Only Rourke walked out, carrying Jenkins' tags and a piece of shrapnel that doctors couldn't remove. "Proximity alert," Maeve announced. "We're inside their point defense range." Rourke pulled a stimulant injector from his vest and jammed it against his neck. The pain in his back roared, then dulled to a manageable scream. His hands stopped shaking for approximately 4 minutes. That's all he needed. He'd programmed Maeve with personality subroutines that violated every galactic AI safety protocol. Where standard artificial intelligence was designed for efficiency and neutrality, Terran AIs developed what engineers called excessive personalization. It was considered a flaw. But research showed that personalized AIs survived longer on failing hardware, developing something researchers struggled to classify: a will to exist. Maeve had been running on 60-year-old quantum processors since before Emma was born. She should have degraded into incoherence a decade ago. "I don't want to stop existing," Maeve had said once, during a maintenance cycle when Rourke asked if she wanted to be transferred to newer hardware. "Yeah," he'd replied, "me neither." The command cruiser filled the viewport. Rourke could see the docking bays, the weapon arrays, the perfect geometric beauty of Veilor design. And he aimed the spite straight at the bridge. "They're deploying gas," Maeve warned. "Neurotoxin. Nasty stuff." Rourke checked his exoskeleton seals. The Terran Class M exoskeleton was 80 years obsolete by galactic standards, built during an era when humans primarily killed each other with chemical weapons and needed to survive in the aftermath. The filters were designed for nerve agents humanity had created in the darkest period of their history. The Veilor had never fought humans. They didn't know what humanity did to itself before reaching the stars. Rourke crashed through the docking bay shields in a maneuver that broke 6 more ribs and completely destroyed the spite's remaining structure. Metal screamed. Alarms died. And in the sudden silence, Rourke unstrapped himself, grabbed the old scatterpulse rifle he'd carried since Mars, and stepped into the corridor of an alien empire. A young Veilor soldier stood 3 meters away, weapon raised. He couldn't have been more than 18 galactic years. His compound eyes were wide with fear. Rourke hesitated. 3 seconds. That's all it took. The soldier fired. Pain exploded in Rourke's shoulder as the energy bolt punched through his exoskeleton and burned through muscle. Training took over. Rourke's return shot was automatic, practiced, lethal. The soldier crumpled, and Rourke vomited in the corridor. "You hesitated," Maeve observed through his neural link. "That's new. Or maybe you're just getting old." "I'm tired of being the one who lives," Rourke whispered. He forced himself to stand, to move, to continue. Behind him, the spite's reactor finally achieved critical mass and exploded, sealing the docking bay and ensuring there was no retreat. There never had been. Velkarin observed through internal sensors as the human moved through his ship like a ghost. Not with the efficiency of a trained soldier, but with the terrible determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. "The human is wounded," the tactical coordinator reported. "Multiple contusions, fractured ribs, radiation exposure. He should be incapacitated." "Should be," Velkarin echoed. But he continues. The Veilor collective consciousness operated on shared thought, shared purpose, shared peace. For 3,000 years, they had brought unity to a chaotic galaxy. They had eliminated suffering through collective harmony. They had saved hundreds of species from the isolation of individual consciousness. And yet this single human, bleeding and broken, defied everything they understood about survival instinct. Rourke reached a junction and stopped, leaning against the wall. Maeve's voice crackled in his ear, weaker now. "Rourke, I'm losing cohesion. Hardware's failing. I'm scared." "Yeah," Rourke breathed. "Me neither. But we don't get to choose." Through the pain and exhaustion, Rourke pulled out his communicator and accessed the message he'd recorded before leaving Earth. Emma's name flashed on the screen. He'd recorded it knowing she'd never open it, never listen, never forgive him. But he transmitted it anyway. Emma, I know you hate me. I don't blame you. I chose war over you, over and over. But today, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing everyone down there who gets to wake up tomorrow. I hope that counts for something. I hope you remember I tried. The transmission burned through the last of his communication array, reaching for Earth through the electronic chaos of battle. It never arrived. The systems burned out in the EMP that was still 4 minutes away from firing. But Rourke didn't know that. He just knew he'd tried. Maeve's voice came through one last time, singing softly. A country song he used to play for Emma during long car rides before the wars, before the network collapse, before everything fell apart. You know what I realized, Rourke? You humans, you break, you bleed, you fail, but you keep showing up. That's not bravery, that's spite. And I think I love spite. Rourke smiled through blood and tears. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't let it go to your head. Now get moving. The bridge is 200 meters ahead, and you've got a priest to terrify. Elias Rourke, the last to retreat, pushed off the wall and continued forward, carrying the weight of 23 names, one daughter who hated him, and the stubborn human conviction that some things were worth dying for. Velkarin found the human collapsed against the wall 3 corridors from the bridge, a trail of blood marking his path like a grotesque breadcrumb trail. By all medical calculations, he should be dead. Instead, he was laughing. This is it? Rourke coughed, red spattering his lips. 3,000 years of evolution, and you still build corridors that all look the same? The high priest approached cautiously. Through the collective consciousness, he felt the confusion of his crew, the uncertainty rippling through minds accustomed to unity and purpose. One human had invaded their flagship, killed 17 soldiers, and somehow reached the command level. Valor tactical reports documented 47 attempted interceptions during the humans' approach. 46 failed not due to calculation errors, but because the pilot operated outside predictable parameters. He accelerated when doctrine demanded deceleration, used reactor micro-explosions as emergency thrust, and disabled shields to increase velocity. The technical conclusion filed in their archives would read, insanity or genius, probably both. You came alone, Velkarin stated. Not a question, but an attempt to understand. Against an empire. This is suicide. Rourke used the wall to pull himself upright, his exoskeleton groaning with the effort. The Class M frame, designed 80 years ago to help soldiers survive chemical warfare and nuclear fallout, had kept him alive through impacts that would have pulped an unaugmented human. Barely. Someone had to, Rourke said, and I already lost everything worth living for. But they, he gestured vaguely toward Earth, haven't. 8 billion people and my daughter. She hates me. She's right to. But I can give her tomorrow, even if she never knows I tried. You die for people who do not love you? Rourke's laugh was harsh. No, I die so they get to love, to hate, to choose. That's what you don't get. Freedom isn't about being loved. It's about being free to feel anything at all. Velkarin's sensory appendages rippled with incomprehension. The Valor had eliminated such chaos 3,000 years ago when they achieved collective consciousness. No more loneliness, no more individual suffering, no more irrational choices made in isolation. We offer peace, Velkarin said, unity, an end to your species' self-destructive isolation. Why do you resist salvation? Because it's not salvation if we don't choose it. The philosophical paradox hung in the air between them. In the background, Maeve's failing systems flickered through Rourke's neural link. Rourke, she whispered, her voice fragmenting. Terra's signal, the EMP. I'm detecting the preliminary pulse. 4 minutes out, 4 minutes. Rourke swallowed blood. That's a lifetime. Velkarin made a gesture, and 6 guards emerged from side corridors, weapons trained. You have courage. I acknowledge this. But courage without wisdom is merely elaborate suicide. Surrender. I will ensure your people are treated with honor during conversion. Rourke reached for his rifle, found it empty, dropped it. Then did something that made every Valor consciousness recoil in unified shock. He smiled. You don't understand us at all, do you? Humans don't surrender because it's logical. We keep fighting because that's what we do. We're descended from persistence predators. Our ancestors chased prey until it died of exhaustion. We ran mammoth into extinction. We've been doing stupid, impossible things since we figured out how to throw rocks. He took a step forward, and the guards tensed. Blood ran down his arm from the shoulder wound, dripped from his mouth where he'd bitten through his cheek. His hands shook from stimulant overload and chronic pain. 47 years old, carrying 23 ghosts and one impossible mission. Here's what's going to happen, Rourke continued. In about 3 minutes, Earth is going to fire something you didn't expect. My ship, what's left of it, is transmitting a beacon, a target. And when that pulse hits, every ship in your blockade is going dark. Impossible, Velkarin said. We would detect such a weapon charging. You did. You just didn't recognize it. See, that's the thing about humanity. We've been killing each other with electromagnetic pulses since the 21st century. It's old tech, ancient by your standards. But we had 200 years of isolation to get really, really good at one thing, surviving what we do to ourselves. The Genesis pulse weapon, developed in secret during Earth's isolation, was based on Cold War-era technology that galactic powers had long abandoned as primitive. It required a ship-based beacon to triangulate targeting coordinates. First recorded combat deployment would be logged in Valor archives as the Siege of Earth, 2457. Velkarin accessed tactical data. There was a power signature emanating from Earth, but it had been classified as background nuclear radiation from the planet's documented civil conflicts. Maeve, Rourke subvocalized. How long? 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Rourke, I need to tell you something. Not now, Maeve. Yes, now. Her voice cracked, digital emotion bleeding through failing processors. I'm not going to make it. Core's degrading. I can feel myself forgetting things. Important things, like the way you take your coffee. Or that stupid song you sing when you think I'm not listening. Rourke's throat tightened. Maeve, I know we joke, but I don't want to stop existing. I'm scared, Rourke. Yeah, me neither. But we don't get to choose. Velkarin watched the human's expression shift through what the collective consciousness could only interpret as profound grief. For a machine, for an artificial construct, the emotional investment was irrational, inefficient, and completely incomprehensible. Your AI is failing, Velkarin observed. Her name is Maeve, Rourke snapped, and she's been my partner for 15 years. She's saved my life 47 times. She sings country music when I'm having nightmares about Mars. She's more alive than half the people I've known. It is programming. No. Rourke met Velkarin's multifaceted gaze. She's family. The human concept of pack bonding, documented in galactic anthropological studies, extended beyond biological relations to include machines, animals, and even inanimate objects. Terran soldiers named their weapons, spacecraft, vehicles. They formed emotional attachments that served no survival purpose. It was classified as a quirk of their evolutionary psychology, a remnant from when they lived in small tribal groups. But seeing it in action, Velkarin found it disturbing in a way he couldn't articulate through the collective. 2 minutes, Maeve reported. Rourke, there's something else. The message you sent to Emma. It didn't transmit. Communications burned out during the entry burn. Rourke closed his eyes. Of course it did. I'm sorry. Not your fault. Rourke forced his eyes open, forced himself to stand straighter. At least I tried. Velkarin made a decision. Guards, incapacitate him. Prepare for immediate retreat from this system. But the human moved first. Rourke lunged, not at the guards, but at the wall panel. His fingers, scarred from years of burning them on failing reactors, slammed against the emergency bulkhead control. Sections of the corridor sealed, cutting off 3 guards. The remaining 3 fired. Energy bolts burned through his already damaged exoskeleton. Rourke screamed, the sound raw and animal. But he kept moving, kept fighting, driven by the same stubborn biology that let his ancestors run prey to death across African plains. "Stop," Velkarin commanded. "You gain nothing. You cannot win." Rourke, on his knees now, blood pooling beneath him, laughed. "Don't have to win. Just have to last 90 more seconds." Maeve's voice came through, singing that country song again. The one Emma loved. 1 minute. Velkarin felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of collective unity. Doubt. This was wrong. The mathematics said the human should surrender. The probability said he should flee. The logic demanded self-preservation. But humans operated on different mathematics. "You're all monsters," a junior officer transmitted through the collective. "We're watching one dying human hold an entire empire at bay." "Not monsters," Velkarin corrected, watching Rourke struggle to his feet one more time. "Something worse. Something we cannot calculate." 30 seconds, Maeve whispered. "Rourke, I'm losing cohesion. I can't remember things. But I remember this. I remember spite, and I love it. Best damn partner I ever had," Rourke breathed. The countdown hit 0, and the universe went dark. The electromagnetic pulse hit like the hand of an angry god. Every system on every Valor ship died simultaneously. Lights, weapons, life support. The collective consciousness network that bound them together for 3,000 years. All of it, gone in an instant. 200 cruisers became 200 tombs floating in the void around Earth. In the sudden darkness of the command bridge, Rourke floated, gravity having failed along with everything else. Blood formed perfect spheres around him, drifting like grotesque pearls in 0G. His exoskeleton was dead weight now, unpowered, slowly crushing his broken ribs. Velkarin floated 3 meters away, his compound eyes adjusting to emergency bioluminescence. For the first time in 3 centuries, he was alone in his own mind. The collective was gone. No shared thoughts, no unified purpose. Just him, drowning in the terrifying ocean of individual consciousness. "It worked," Rourke coughed, each word agony. "Told you." The High Priest's appendages trembled. "What have you done? Given my people tomorrow?" Rourke tried to laugh, managed a wet cough instead. "And given you something you haven't had in 3,000 years. A choice." Velkarin wanted to kill him, should kill him. But in the darkness, separated from the collective for the first time since his youth, something else emerged. Curiosity, respect, something the unified consciousness had smoothed away. "You came alone," Velkarin said quietly. "One human. Against an empire. Someone had to." This was suicide. Rourke's hand found purchase on a wall strut, and he pulled himself closer to the High Priest. In the dim light, Velkarin could see the extent of the damage. This human should have died in the blockade run. Should have died in the docking bay. Should have died in the corridor. Should have, but didn't. "Why?" Velkarin asked. "Why come? Your planet had time to evacuate key personnel, preserve your species. You could have fled. And left Earth to you?" Rourke shook his head. "That's not who we are. We don't abandon home. Not when we can fight. You fight battles you cannot win. Sometimes." Rourke's breathing was getting shallower. "But sometimes the fight is the point. Sometimes you stand up just to prove you can. That's what you never understood about us. We're not fighting because we think we'll win. We're fighting because the alternative is living on our knees." The paradox of human defiance, studied by xenopsychologists across the galaxy, centered on this principle. Humans would choose painful resistance over comfortable subjugation, even when logic demanded surrender. It was considered a flaw in their evolutionary programming, a glitch that should have been selected out of the species millennia ago. Instead, it made them terrifying. "Your people will rebuild," Velkarin said. "They will come for us." Maybe. Rourke's vision was darkening at the edges. Or maybe they'll surprise you. Build bridges instead of weapons. Humans are good at that too, when we're not busy being stubborn bastards. Emergency power began flickering back online. Backup systems, isolated from the main grid, untouched by the EMP. Red emergency lighting bathed the bridge in crimson. Velkarin could kill Rourke now, should, by every tactical calculation. The human was helpless, dying. One command and this threat would end. But in the silence of his own mind, Velkarin made a choice that was his alone. He released the medical restraints from a storage panel and floated them to Rourke. "Live," he said. "So when your people rebuild their ships, you can tell them what happened here. Tell them the Valor learned something today." Rourke blinked, surprised. "What did you learn? That you are not a failed colony. You are something we have never encountered, something terrifying and beautiful in equal measure." "Yeah," Rourke wheezed. "We're human. We fail. We break. But we don't quit." The bridge systems continued their reboot. Communications would be next. Velkarin accessed the command network and prepared to transmit across all ships. "Command, this is High Priest Velkarin." The collective network struggled back online, confusion cascading through reconnecting minds. "I have witnessed something unprecedented. What are your orders?" Multiple commanders asked simultaneously. "Withdraw. All ships. Immediately." "High Priest? This system belongs to them. We have no claim here." But the human invasion, the attack, was one man. Velkarin looked at Rourke, who was attempting to bandage his shoulder wound with the medical supplies. One man in a failing ship, and he defeated 200 cruisers. Not with weapons, with will. I do not understand this species, but I respect them. The decision rippled through the collective consciousness. Some minds agreed, many did not. But Velkarin was High Priest, and his word was doctrine. "When you rebuild," Velkarin said to Rourke, "come find us, not as enemies, as equals." Rourke managed a weak salute. "We'll see. Depends on whether Emma ever forgives me." Emma, my daughter, 16 years old, hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. I sent her a message before this all started. Rourke's laugh was bitter. "Never made it through. Communication systems burned out. Then tell her yourself." "Not sure I'm making it home, Priest." Maeve's voice crackled through Rourke's failing neural link, barely coherent. "Rourke, escape pod. Starboard corridor. Automated. Still has power." "Maeve?" Rourke's voice cracked. "You're still here?" "Barely. Core's at 5%. I'm forgetting so much. But I remember you. I remember Spite. Come with me. I can carry the core." "No." Her voice was fading. Too damaged. Too heavy. "You can barely carry yourself." "Rourke, listen. Listen to me. I'm listening. Tell Emma I said you were brave. Because you were. You are. Maeve, please." "I don't want to go," she whispered. "But it was a good run. Better than any AI deserves. I got to be alive, Rourke. Really alive. And that's because you treated me like family. You are family. Then do me one last favor. Live. Get home. See that stubborn kid of yours. Tell her her dad was a stubborn bastard who loved her enough to cross hell." The neural link flickered. Maeve. Silence. Maeve. Static. The AI that had been his partner for 15 years, that had saved his life 47 times, that sang country songs and smoked virtual cigarettes and developed a will to exist that violated every galactic protocol about artificial intelligence, was gone. Rourke floated in the darkness and cried for the first time since Mars. Velkarin watched, understanding nothing and everything simultaneously. The human wept for a machine with the same grief he might show for a biological companion. It was irrational. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. "Go," Velkarin said gently, "while you still can." Rourke wiped his eyes, pushed off the wall, and drifted toward the corridor. At the threshold, he paused. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me try to make it home." "Thank you," Velkarin replied, "for showing us what it means to choose." The escape pod ejected 3 minutes later. Earth's sensors tracked its trajectory, watched it descend toward the planet in a ball of atmospheric fire. Communications were intermittent, damaged, but one final transmission made it through, recorded by Earth Defense monitoring stations. Siege broken, home safe. Maeve says the sunset is beautiful from here. Analysis would show the message originated from a pod in freefall, life support systems offline, trajectory indicating terminal velocity re-entry. Thermal signatures were inconclusive. Something entered Earth's atmosphere. Whether it was debris or a man, the sensors couldn't determine. The truth remained ambiguous. Hope remained alive. 3 months after the siege ended, Emma Rourke stood in the rain outside a makeshift memorial in what used to be Central Park. The monument was rough, hastily constructed from debris and hope, a twisted piece of hull plating from the spite, mounted on a concrete base. Someone had welded a plaque beneath it. She read the words for the 3rd time, letting rain blur the letters. Elias Rourke, last of the Martian Legion. First to break the blockade, last to retreat. She was 16 years old and her father had been dead for 3 months, probably dead. The records were unclear. They'd found the escape pod impact site in the Atlantic, empty, no body, no trace, just scorch marks and the ghost of a transmission that might have been his last words or might have been equipment failure. Emma had stopped speaking to him when she was 13. He'd missed her birthday, again. Missed her graduation from middle school. Missed everything that mattered because he was too busy carrying ghosts from a war that ended before she was born. She'd hated him for it. Still did, if she was honest. But 3 days ago, while helping clean out old server backups at the defense monitoring station where she'd been volunteering, she'd found something. A corrupted file, mostly destroyed by the EMP that had saved Earth. Most of it was static, but 43 seconds had survived. She pulled out her handheld and played it again, standing in the rain. His voice, damaged and broken. "Emma, I know you hate me. I don't blame you. I chose war over you, over and over. But today, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing everyone down there who gets to wake up tomorrow. I hope that counts for something. I hope you remember I tried." Emma wiped her eyes, told herself it was rain. It counted, she whispered to the memorial. "It counted, Dad." A woman approached, older, carrying flowers. She placed them at the base of the monument next to the dozen others already there. Emma recognized her, Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the few surviving members of the original Martian Legion. She had scars across her face from the tunnel collapse, and her name was 19th on the tattoo that Emma had seen on her father's arm in old photographs. "You're his daughter," Dr. Chen said. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded. "He saved my life on Mars. Carried me 8 kilometers through tunnels that were collapsing around us. I told him to leave me, save himself." She smiled sadly. "He told me to shut up and keep breathing. That sounds like him. We all thought he was looking for death, you know. After what happened in those tunnels. 23 went in. 2 came out. I lived. The others," she gestured at the names on the plaque, "didn't." Emma looked at the memorial again. Why did he keep fighting? Because that's what we do. "Doctor?" Chen put a hand on Emma's shoulder. "We're human. We fail. We break. We carry impossible weight. But we keep showing up. Your father, he showed up for 8 billion people when no one else would. He didn't show up for me." The words came out harsh, bitter. True. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. No, he didn't. And that was his failure. But Emma, he showed up for you in the only way he knew how. He gave you a world where you're free to hate him. Emma closed her eyes. That's a pretty way to say he was a terrible father. He was. But he was also the man who crossed hell alone, so you'd have tomorrow. Both things are true. In orbit above them, the Valor had left behind automated monitoring stations before withdrawing. They'd been broadcasting for 3 months now, recording everything about Earth's recovery, not as conquerors, as students. Velkarin had transmitted a message to Earth's reformed government 2 weeks after the siege. It had been translated, debated, and finally released to the public. To the people of Earth, we came to your world offering what we believed was salvation, unity, peace through collective consciousness. We believed individual suffering was a flaw to be corrected. And then one of you taught us something we had forgotten in 3,000 years of unity. Choice. The freedom to fail. The right to stand alone, even when standing means dying. We withdraw not in defeat, but in respect. When you rebuild your ships, find us. We would learn more about what it means to be human. The message had sparked 1,000 debates. Some wanted vengeance. Some wanted alliance. Some wanted isolation. Humanity, as always, couldn't agree on anything. Emma thought that would have made her father laugh. The rain intensified. Dr. Chen opened an umbrella, offered to share. Emma shook her head. She wanted to feel the rain. Wanted to feel something real and present. There's talk of building actual ships, Dr. Chen said. Not just orbital defense platforms, real deep space vessels. They're calling the first one the Spite. Emma almost smiled. He'd hate that. Probably. But the second one, they're naming after his AI. The Maeve. Dr. Chen paused. I read the recovered logs. She was remarkable. She was family, Emma said quietly, remembering the message. That's what he called her. Family. They stood together in silence, 2 people connected by a man who had been simultaneously heroic and flawed, who had saved a world while failing the daughter who needed him. Finally, Emma pulled a photograph from her jacket. Creased, old, protected in a waterproof sleeve. Her at 8 years old, smiling at a beach that no longer existed. The same photograph her father had carried into battle. She'd found it in his apartment when she'd finally worked up the courage to go through his things. It had been on his desk, next to a half-written letter that started, Dear Emma, I'm sorry. He'd never finished it. Never sent it. Another thing left incomplete. Emma placed the photograph at the base of the memorial, next to Dr. Chen's flowers and all the others. I'm still angry, she said. I don't know if I'll ever stop being angry. That's okay, Dr. Chen replied. He'd understand. Do you think he made it? The question hung in the rain. Dr. Chen considered. The pod impact site was inconclusive. No body recovered. The thermal signature analysis suggested something survived re-entry, but the readings were degraded. The final transmission, Maeve says the sunset is beautiful from here, could have been automated. Could have been him. Could have been wishful thinking translated through damaged equipment. So maybe. Maybe, Dr. Chen agreed. And knowing your father, if there was a 0.03% chance of survival, he'd find it. Emma looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear through breaking clouds. Somewhere up there, the Valor watched. Somewhere beyond, the galaxy continued, vast and indifferent. But Earth remained. 8 billion people woke up this morning because one stubborn man refused to quit. I hope you're out there, Emma whispered. I hope you made it. And someday when I'm not so angry, I hope I can tell you that it counted. That you counted. The wind picked up, carrying rain and the scent of growing things. Humanity had always rebuilt. After wars, after collapse, after the network fell and left them alone in the dark, they rebuilt, adapted, survived. It's what they did. 3 months after the siege, construction began on the first human deep space vessel in 2 centuries. The Spite would launch in 5 years, carrying a crew of explorers, diplomats, and scientists. Its mission: find the Valor, establish dialogue, explore what lay beyond. And somewhere in the crew manifest, Emma Rourke's name appeared. 16 years old now, but she'd be 21 by launch. Old enough, angry enough, stubborn enough. Her father's daughter, after all. She took one last look at the memorial, at the photograph she'd left behind, at the legacy of a man who'd failed her but saved her world. Then she turned and walked into the rain, toward whatever tomorrow held. Behind her, on the twisted hull plating that had once been part of a ship held together by spite and hope, someone had carved additional words beneath the official plaque. Unofficial, unsanctioned, true. He came alone. He held the line. He gave us tomorrow. Humanity, fuck yeah. The memorial stood in the rain, a promise and a challenge. The galaxy had seen what one human could do when pushed to the edge. Had witnessed what happened when you gave humanity a choice between comfortable surrender and painful defiance. They'd choose defiance, every time. Not because they were the strongest, not because they had the best weapons or the most advanced technology, but because somewhere in their evolutionary history, they'd decided that freedom mattered more than survival. That choice trumped certainty, that the right to fail was worth the risk of falling. The Valor would spend the next century studying that choice, trying to understand it, integrate it into their collective consciousness. Other species would hear the story and wonder. Some would be inspired, some would be terrified. All of them would remember the name Elias Rourke. And on Earth, in thousands of homes, parents would tell their children the story of the last to retreat, the man who crossed an empire alone. The details would blur over time, become legend, myth, eventually something between history and fairy tale. But the core would remain true. One human, one ship, one choice that changed everything. Because that's what humans did. They showed up. They stood up. They didn't quit. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to move the stars. The rain continued to fall. The memorial remained. And somewhere in the vast darkness between worlds, a signal echoed. Siege broken. Home safe. The sunset is beautiful from here. End. In the end, the story of Elias Rourke wasn't about one man crossing a blockade. It was about a species that refused to be defined by logic or fear. A species that built meaning from pain and purpose from failure. In a universe that measures worth in victory, humanity reminded the stars that defiance itself can be sacred. Maybe that's what we are. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but the ones who keep showing up, even when everything says we shouldn't. Because to be human isn't about winning. It's about choosing to try, even when trying means dying. What do you think makes humanity worth remembering? Our victories or our mistakes? Would you have crossed the siege, knowing no one might ever remember your name? When everything is lost, what keeps you standing? Hope, love, or sheer defiance? If this story reached you, write the word defiance in the comments, just to show you stayed until the end. Tell me, from which city or planet are you watching? Subscribe if you believe that stories like this remind us what we're still capable of. Like, share, and click on the final card to see more tales of what it truly means to be human, out there among the stars.